Imagine managing a restaurant that serves thousands of customers every day. Now imagine those customers all arrive within a 90-minute window. That's the challenge many workplace cafeterias face. Facility leaders spend enormous amounts of time optimizing buildings, maintenance programs, and workplace services. Yet one of the largest daily employee touchpoints, the cafeteria, often operates with limited visibility into performance, flow, and customer behavior. Questions like how long are employees waiting in line? Which stations are creating bottlenecks? How much food is being wasted? Are staffing levels aligned with demand? Most organizations aren't asking these questions, and today I'm joined by Willem De Cock, founder of CaterInsight and CaterFlow, platforms designed to help organizations measure, manage, and optimize workplace catering operations. We're going to discuss restaurant flow, workplace food service management, and how facility leaders can use data to create better employee experiences. Welcome to the Facility Focus podcast presented by New Standard Cleaning. Today I'm joined by Willem De Cock, founder of CaterInsight and CaterFlow. We're discussing optimizing the workplace catering experience and the future of food service within facilities. Hi, Willem. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, I appreciate your time and coming on. I'm interested in getting into what you're working on. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about how you got started in hospitality?
I was the son of an expat. My father was an engineer, so we traveled all around the world. We spent about 10 years in Africa, a few years in the Middle East. Then I finished my high school in Switzerland. I joined them again in South America. The only country of South America which is not South America, which is French Guiana. Then I finished hotel school in Switzerland. So from the hotel school in Switzerland, the real hospitality started. But the passion of hotels came, of course, because of my parents traveling a lot, and so we were spending a lot of time in hotels. And so in my head, it was okay. Later, I will do a hotel business. I've worked in hotels for about 15 years in Belgium and abroad. I worked in Bahrain. I worked in Egypt. I worked in Madeira, in Amsterdam. And then in 2002, returned to Belgium, decided that there was no real, because I was always working in luxury hotels, 5-star hotels, decided that there was no real 5-star level in Brussels. So I asked myself, where else could I use my talents? And I was approached by a big catering company and then shifted to catering for big clients, which I worked in operations for about 10 years. And then the last 15 years of catering has been more innovation, strategy, and putting the catering of the future. I've worked for a while in a big catering company, and then about four years ago, I started my own company as a consultant, where I mainly do strategy in catering and innovation, everything that's high-level catering for very, very big companies.
Great. That's fascinating. I used to work in a yacht club as a waiter when I was in my early 20s. That's my only real experience in, high-end, spaces. Starting on, when you were, early in your career, did you do like a little bit of everything, or have you always been in the catering side of things?
I've always worked on I did the very classic, what they would call hotel management, which is you start with stewarding, because then you learn to work, and then you go to cost control, because then you learn the figures, and then you go to banqueting, because then you learn the sales, and when you have it all, you become F&B manager.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from F&B manager to assistant general manager, and that's when I left the hotel business. So I did basically the food and beverage part.
Yeah, that's cool. I tell people sometimes that my experience in the yacht club, it kind of gave me confidence that I didn't have as a young man. I was nervous to talk in front of people, a little bit, and probably my work ethic was not there at the time. But really, it's like a little bit of a boot camp, like a military boot camp to get you up to level. And then once you're in it, it becomes very fun and you
Mhm.
become very proud of what you're doing. So
Absolutely.
that's great. So I want to ask you about CaterInsight and CaterFlow. You said those companies came about in the last 4 years or so?
Yes. So
Yeah.
in the last 4 years, I've mainly done consultancy for big companies and for big caterers, establishing the vision they could have in what about the future of catering, and also working on innovations. One thing we saw, and that is mainly after the COVID period, the things I was telling before the COVID period are now actually all happening very quickly, because what I was preaching as being a vision before COVID, as you say, every change needs a burning platform. And the burning platform was COVID, where
Mm-hmm.
everybody said, okay, now things will change.
Mm-hmm.
Because with COVID came home office, people going less to the office. And so the whole way of doing catering has changed. One of the things that the caterers and the clients really needed was data. You cannot manage anymore without the data, because the data will give you the correct way to manage, as people are not coming anymore 5 days to the office, but they're coming 2 days. I even work with companies where they're coming 1 day a week. So there you need to have a more flexible way of doing catering, and you need to have much more data to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working on that data, and I worked about 6 months ago. We came out with CaterInsight. CaterInsight is a way for companies to manage their data, because now companies are mainly depending on their caterer to get their data. Here with CaterInsight, the companies can manage their own data, and they can even benchmark themselves with other companies in the same country, in the same area. And they can do a certain amount of other tools, like a cater survey, where they can do a survey regarding satisfaction. But there is also cater profile, which they can do a survey to have the exact profiles of people they have, the amount of snackers, the amount of grazers, the amount of traditionalists, or the amount of budgeteers that are actually in their company, so that they can know if their offer actually fits the type of clients they have, of the kind of profiles they have in the company. And then the latest we developed, which was CaterFlow, which for me is one of the most important and the most game-changing solutions we developed. It's software to analyze the flow of a free flow of a self-service, and to see, by adapting certain, because everything is, we can put a lot of different how you say, parameters, or you can actually tweak every little point, and then we can see if we can enhance the flow. Because I sometimes they call me Mr. Flow. I think that in a catering contract or in a catering concept, one of the most important points is the point you don't talk about, and that's the flow. If the food, very often when you go and you speak with a company who wants catering, you speak about the food offer, but changing a food offer, if it's not right, you can change it almost overnight. But if the flow is not right and your restaurant has been badly built, then you very often get stuck with it for a very long time.
Is that
And
because of the way that it's designed, that the cafeteria or, the dining area is designed poorly?
yes, one thing is the way it's been designed. One thing is it has to do with actually in the beginning, the cafeterias, when we call them cafeterias, you stand in line and you were just moving in line, and whatever offer you wanted, everybody was moving behind each other. It was a little bit like in school. And then more and more, they decided that the experience had to be enhanced, that the experience had to be better. And they said, oh, we could go to those free flow restaurants where people actually move more freely and they go where they want, which was a good idea. The only thing which I think they didn't measure at that time is, when you go to a regular free flow, they don't throw 400 people in 15 minutes. Yeah. If you work in some of the restaurants where I'm consulting, they're passing 1,250 people in 90 minutes. That's an awful lot of people. So if you throw that in a free flow that is not designed properly, it's a metro station
Mm-hmm.
at rush hour. So
Yeah.
that means that basically it's all, people are crossing each other, people are in a hurry, people try to get their food quickly, they have to make too many stops. And if you don't get the flow right, then the food can be as good as you want, it won't save the day. So that's why I put a lot of importance on the free flow, because it's the
Yeah.
beginning of the experience, and that's where you make it or you break it.
Right. And you have, employee satisfaction on the top of your mind. These are, amenities that the company is offering to their employees. And if they have to wait for a long time and they only have an hour or 30 minutes and they can't functionally get through the space, it just becomes frustrating. And it sounds like that's what your solution is trying to solve.
Exactly. So there are very different topics. The first one is it becomes frustrating and the food won't save it. So basically it's very often a very big area, a very costly area. I mean, a free flow or in a kitchen, you often speak about 1 million. To build a big kitchen, so it's a big investment, and if it's not done rightly to have that result, that of course is scary. And then the other thing is, by the fact that people know that it's not going to be very easy to move through, they're already in a mindset of, okay, I need to rush through it. And you know what? I'm not going to take any dessert anymore because it's an extra stop, it's an extra line. And so basically you're shooting yourself in your own foot because they're taking less food, or some people just don't come to the cafeteria anymore at all. I met people, I said, oh, well, you don't go to the cafeteria. Oh no, it's crazy. I'm standing in line for way too long. And with this tool, we start from the existing, I would say the existing way it is, and we measure that people can stay until 15, 16 minutes inside the free flow. It's 15 or 16 minutes when you have half an hour to eat. That's an awful lot of time.
And they may already know what they want.
Yes.
Right? They, because sometimes the menus are sent out in an email blast, so they might already know, I want to get this. So yeah, that's interesting.
And at the same time, that was very much the generations before, because in strategy and in Cater Profile, where I work with profiles, we look a lot at generations, because generations are very, very different. Where the baby boomers and the generation X pretty know the menu, and they go to the cafeteria knowing what they're going to eat, and they have a pattern because they have a family, so they know that I'm eating hot at home, so I'm eating a sandwich so I mean, their pattern is pretty much the same every day. The younger generation, they don't want to know. They're Netflixers. They go and stand in the middle of the room and they go like, no, today I'll eat this. And so that's where you even need more space, just to make sure that they come not prepared to the restaurant. They very much go on feeling. They actually even have very, very often a problem with the way the menus are made today. Today, the menus are made on a daily basis. There's a different menu every day. The younger generations, they go, no, why do you try to make me eat tomato soup on Tuesday? I mean, I want tomato soup on Wednesday. You have tomatoes on Tuesday. Why don't you have them anymore on Wednesday? So they have a completely different way of looking at. And within the next years, I mean, the millennials and Generation Z will be more than 50% of the work floor. So you need to design your free flows now for them. You don't need to design them anymore for the baby boomers.
Right. So we know that the flow is extremely important. How do you collect the data? So let's say you have a new client, and I imagine you have to do some kind of research going in to see what their weak points are or the problems that you can solve. How do you collect the data? How is that interpreted? So kind of talk to me about that process.
The process is we actually ask for the plan from the free flow, which we digitalize in our system. We put the counters as they are. We define in very specific what's happening at the counters. How many people are there standing behind the counters? Is it complicated? Are they preparing the dish at the moment when the person is standing in front of them, or are they preparing the dishes before and the person just needs to take the dishes? How many people are standing behind the counter? And all this will determine the time people will spend in front of a counter. So we do that for every counter. Is it a self-service counter without staff? And once we have determined all the counters, we take the sales mix, which we often get from the point of sales, and we just put it inside the computer and say, okay, this is what the people eat. So many people take sandwiches, so many people take a hot course, so many people have a dessert, etc. We put in some logistic points, which is, for example, do the people get their tray at the counter where they take the hot food, or is the tray at the entrance, or do they take the glass at the beginning, or do they take the glass when they move out? So we give all these different points to the system. And then the system basically runs real little people that you see walking all through the free flow. And it actually simulates the flow. And from that, we get the heat map. And the heat map shows us which are the areas that are too much used, which are the areas where there's congestion, and which are the areas that are actually not enough used. Once we've done that, I would say with the actual situation, then we start playing, which is the funnest part. Then we start saying, okay, what if instead of having 3 cash out points, we put 2 cash out points and 5 self scans? Yeah, or is that going to give a better flow? What if we move the main course and the food show and we switch them? We put them on different to see if we can maybe expand the offer a little bit, or the counter that is most congested, we put it further away. So we make all kind of different simulations to see what is increasing the score. Every time we do it, we have a score, and where you see that, I would say this has all been possible thanks to AI. Because with AI, we see actually that the computer can, I mean, a simulation, when you run it, it's like 5 seconds. And then he gives you the heat map, he gives you the whole thing. And I will give you the example why AI is important is, we did this test with the free flow that I know very well. And then when I know where the problems are, and the computer came to the same conclusion as me, which is good, which means that my brain is now in the computer. And then I thought like, okay, I'm going to put 8 self-scan cash registers. So that, because one of the biggest problems was the cash flow was going too slow. So the lines were coming up in front of the counters. And then we just changed it to 8 self-scans. And I went from a grade, which was D- to A. So I went like, okay, I've got the solution. Yeah. The only thing is the computers told me, okay, now you've done this, Willem, you have a problem in the seating area because you only have 400 chairs. And as people are flowing too quickly through the paid, they're standing with their tray and you miss about 150 chairs for people to be seated. So this is where you see that something that even I had in my mind was a solution.
Yeah.
The computer told me, wait a minute, now you've no bottleneck anymore in your free flow, but you have a bottleneck in your room. And so this allows us to say, okay, we need to fine tune. Maybe we don't need 8, maybe we need 6. Maybe we don't need to go too fast. Maybe we need to buffer a little bit so that people have the time to eat in the room. So, and that's where the system is really helping. It's because we can play and we can really fine tune until we find the right solution. And also when you do building works, when you say to the client, oh, you need to change the counter, you need to make a new counter or whatever, I would recommend today, I've often done this, and I said, oh, you need to change the counters. Today, I would say, let's do the new setup you would like in CaterFlow, and let's see if it works really out the investment you're going to make.
Right. Have you worked with designers and architects on, planning out these areas, or are you mainly coming in after they have been set up and helping to maximize their efficiency?
Well, we built CaterFlow. It's now only been 1 month that we actually build it, but it's good that you say, because what we see is we build it to find a solution for a client. And actually the people that have now come to us to see if they could buy a license are people that are building kitchens and are architects. They're saying, Willem, can you license this product? And we didn't think of that before. We were just thinking about how can we help our clients. So now we're actually speaking more with the big kitchen companies and architects and caterers to actually license the product so that they can use it in, which would be better, because it's better that they build the right free flows, then we don't have to find solutions later.
Yes, it's less headache for, the customer at the end of the day. That's fascinating. This is not something that I obviously this is tailored towards large companies, large facilities. So this is not a topic that comes up a lot, just in regular facilities conversation. So it's really interesting. What are sort of the biggest inefficiencies that you see most often?
The biggest inefficiencies I see is catering is a very traditional business. These people very often grow from really the love and the passion of the food, and that they want to sell to people. And what I see very often is the lack of data, which is like, okay, but who are you catering? Do you know who you're catering for? That's why we build things like Cater Profile, which didn't exist before, is to say, okay, but are you sure that what you're proposing is actually fitting to the people that are there? So very often the caterers and the clients of the caterers have been going a little bit blindsided on what they needed to do. So that's one of the major mistakes we very often see, is the lack of data and the lack of analyzing really they're sitting on a pile of data. They basically, they know what they're selling. They know how many tickets they close every 15 minutes, but there has never been systems to say, okay, but what can we learn from this, and how can
Hmm.
we do it better? What I often see is catering is very emotional. So it's all about, oh, I like this, so we should do this. But then you have to say, okay, but does it really fit? Is it really worth it? Is it worth the investment? So yeah, most of the things I've seen is the lack of professional way of going about the data they have
Hmm.
in order to fine tune the operations.
Right. Because if you're at a restaurant on the street, the chef there or the management there decides, you know what, it's this season, this is fresh. Maybe the supplier has a special on this, or so they kind of decide their menus based on what they think is going to be popular. But in a workplace setting, it's important to know your employees, demographics, what they are actually interested in having. So I imagine that is some data that you guys collect as well.
Yes, in the very big difference between a commercial restaurant and a company restaurant is a commercial restaurant very often is in the street, 40,000 people pass by, you only need to have 400 of them. They're changing every day, they're 400 differently, so you can have the same offer all the time. In a company restaurant, the 4,000 people that are there are the same every day. So it's a little bit like a marriage. I can cook for you every
Hmm.
day, but after a while, you'll go like, Willem, it's very nice, but every day the same thing is not going to work out. So you need to stay attractive and sexy the whole year round with the same consumers. So you better very well know who they are,
Hmm.
which you cannot do in the street. In the street, you say, okay, I'm a product for this type of customers. You're 40,000 to walk around. If 400 of this kind of customers come in every day, I'm happy. Here you have 400 of that, 1,000 of this, 2,000 of this, and you need to cater for all these people all the time.
Hmm. And having this data makes you more effective in inventory. And when it comes to waste, potentially, you're able to, cut the things that don't matter, potentially. Is that right?
Yes, and we're even going a little bit further, which I'm now working on with a caterer in Belgium, is we're looking at the future as a complete change of how you have to look at catering. Because where before we were catering and saying, okay, we really need this daily menu because people are coming every day to the office, so it's important that they have change, and they have a soup on Monday, they have a soup on Tuesday. Now we're saying, why do we change every day? It doesn't make sense anymore for waste. And at the end of the day, people are coming 2 times a week to the office. So if I present 5 different soups and you come 2 times a week, then the only thing I'm obliging you is to eat the soup on that day that you come, that soup. So more and more we're saying, we're going to put 3 soups and we're going to keep them the whole week. Yeah. So at least when you come, you have a choice because there's
Hmm.
3 soups and not one. And at least I don't have waste every day by throwing away the soup because of people didn't come. So we're looking more and more to say, we need to change after COVID. We need to change the way we look at catering. We really need to have a different way. We need to have a sort of restaurant menu where people have much bigger choice. But as we don't change it every day, we have much less waste and we produce differently. Because
Hmm.
if you produce the same thing, then you can say, okay, I have big production days. I have a big production day on Monday. I have a big production day on Wednesday. I have less supplies coming in because I don't need to have supplies every day. I can supply differently. So that's less trucks, less CO2. So we're looking at catering is going through a very, very big change.
Hmm. And I'm sure you could speak to this, but it must play a role in attracting employees back to the workplace that maybe for some time were working from home.
Absolutely. It is. What you see is actually when we were negotiating catering a few years ago, we were negotiating catering with human resources. Then the crisis came and we were negotiating catering with the buyers and finance. And then catering was put to the facility managers, yeah, because it was considered as a facility. And now with the how you say, with the fact that people, they don't want their company they want their company people to come back. They want to hire the right people. Now we're back with human resources, where they say catering is again part of the philosophy that we want to attract the good talents. We want to keep the good talents. So it has to be part of. What you also see is people come to the office now with purpose. Yeah. Before you were going to the office from Monday to Friday. You weren't asking yourself your questions, why you're going. Today, mainly the younger people, they say, okay, if I go to the office, it has to be interesting. Yeah. So mainly it's to socialize. It's to say, I want to see this and this person. So the lunch is a big part of that social part. As you say, oh, let's see each other at the office. Let's eat together. Yeah. This wasn't happening before. So the lunch has become the central point to people, or people say, oh, I'll go in the morning. I'll just go in the morning to the office, but I'll stay for lunch, or I'll come in the afternoon. And you know what? I'll come for lunch. So the lunch is a little bit the thing where actually that attracts people to come at that particular moment, or stay longer, or come from that point on. So lunch has really become, again, very important for human resources.
Yeah, I used to work at a nursing home, and they built a restaurant there for employees and for family members of the people that were residing there. And they remodeled it, and we decided to name it after the foundation that the company had. So it was tying the culture of the foundation that helps pay for people's care into the employee culture, right?
Yes.
And that connection is so simple, right? It's just the thought of it. But yeah, that speaks to what you're just talking about. So you had mentioned that facility managers play a role in catering. What does that look like today in most of the customers that you see?
Well, it's a complicated subject for them, because most of the facility managers are engineers, because the biggest budgets they have to manage are air conditioning, elevators, the building, that stuff. And they like that because that's their background. There's a few services they have more problems managing. Cleaning is not really their background, reception and catering. Now, the two services where you can really make a difference in the day of an employee is reception, but the reception is a lot of training, and food. Cleaning, you can't really make a difference. Cleaning, it's clean or it's not clean. You're never going to have people coming to the office and say, oh, I'm going to the office because it's so clean. That it's not going to happen. Reception, very important. You can make a good day. The elevator is not working. The receptionist is waiting for you with a bottle of water and saying, sorry, the elevator is not working, but you got a bottle of water for today. Okay, makes people smile even though something is not working. And food is the other part. Food is the part where you make it good or not good. So these are really emotional services where you can actually bring an added value. And for me, the background that has helped me a lot in catering is my hotel background. Because, that these are the parts where you can make clients extra happy. Once they've seen the room is good, that's done. If after that, every time they go to the restaurant, the experience is not good, then the whole stay, they will say that the hotel was not good and it's not worth it. So these are all points where you can really make a difference. And that are very difficult for facility managers to manage because it's not in their DNA. They like things that are very straightforward, that are, set in a box. Okay, I have to invest in a new elevator. How much is going to cost me? Okay, I have 3 offers. That's the catering is like, how do we compare caterers? How do we have even an idea of how much we're going to pay? How can we budget? It's very complicated for them.
So it's, is it fair to say that if you're a large company and you want to have a restaurant in your facility, it's important to go all in and to not leave the task to somebody that already has 10 other responsibilities? It needs to be its own department in a sense.
Well, you have companies that actually have a small catering department, but then again, with people that are not really in catering, but they're just checking the invoices, checking the KPIs, checking this. So that's quite expensive if you hire a caterer, which is supposed to do all the stuff right. So that's where we built CaterInsight, which was the idea to say, you know what, let a software manage your KPIs and let this software be the connection between you and the caterer so that you can put the caterer to work. If you put the caterer to work right, he will do the right job. If the caterer feels that he's not controlled or that everything has to come from his side, then he has a tendency to say, okay, business as usual, we just serve food. That's what we do. So very often people say, okay, but what is the right caterer? And I say, and they try to make tenders where they compare food costs. What is the food cost of one? What is the food cost of another? All that doesn't make a difference. Because in a food cost, you can tell whatever you want. And at the end of the day, the food cost is not made on one product, It's not because you have a food cost of a sandwich at that price and the other one has a food cost of a sandwich at that price. The food cost is made on the waste. If the one produces 5 sandwiches too much and the other one produces 20 sandwiches too much because he doesn't use the data, then his food cost is whatever he said on his tender is not going to be right. So the food cost is not what is going to make the difference. It's the way you manage the KPIs you put behind them so that he can work properly. And then the major difference for me is going to be, and that's what I always say to the client, take a caterer that brings you from point A to point B. You have put your vision and you say to the caterer, this is what I have today. I want to have a better flow. I want to have a more adapted offer. I want to have my people so much happier. These are my KPIs and this is where you have to take me in the future. So now you have to do what you need to do to get that done. Yeah, because very often what happens is they do tenders and the caterer that was there is offering this, and the new guy goes, oh, but I can offer much better, and this is what we're going to offer. And then he wins the contract, and then he comes in with 15 people, and they redesign, they put some new labels, and they put the new food, and that's it. And then during 5 years, you're just looking at it, and you say, okay, that was it. It's I always say it's like you have a firework the other way around. You have the bouquet final in the beginning, and then you're just looking the firework to die out. So, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So I always say, go for the caterer that makes a nice firework in the beginning, but ends with an even bigger firework.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that's very difficult.
Yeah. What is the relationship like between the caterer and the food supplier, the vendor that is, delivering the food, or are they at this point, sort of combined in one?
The caterer is selecting his food suppliers. Yeah. And they're negotiating, of course, because they need to have the best deals. So they're negotiating with big food suppliers in order to have very good deals, because that's probably what's going to make them win a market, is because they buy at a very good price. So the suppliers and the caterers are very much linked to each other. They work very well with each other. The caterer is going to try to have the least suppliers possible, because logistic is sometimes costing more than the food. So you cannot afford. So very often now you have, for example, a tendency of clients to say, oh, but it would be nice if you get, all our groceries from the little stores around. It's very complicated because it asks for a lot of logistics, and logistics are very often more expensive than if you deliver low volume with the logistics, then the logistic is waiting too high. So very often the caterers are taking big suppliers, try to reduce the logistic in order to buy at a good price. So they're very much partnerships between the caterers and the food suppliers.
Is the workplace itself trying to turn a profit or to break even on the catering services on the restaurant itself when it comes to, their employees, buying the food? Or is it different? Are they just trying to break even?
I think it's very different from country to country, and it's also very different from company to company. Now, making a profit, for example, in Belgium, where I do most of my expertise, is impossible. Very often, because we say the food is subsidized, which means that very often the companies have made deals with the union, and the main course is sold for €2.50, which is about $3. Yeah, which is $5 under the market price. So every company needs to subsidize, will pay one part of the bill. There are so many different ways of paying the bill that there are clients, because caterers have been playing with all kinds of contracts, and so sometimes the client is paying for the staff, and then the food needs to cover the person that are paying for the food need to cover the food costs, and so they're very different contracts. But in Europe, it's very rare to impossible that actually they break even or they actually will make money. And that comes because it's a catering, I would say, a catering is very different than a commercial model. Yeah. If you would step from catering to commercial model, then, for example, now the companies are saying, oh yeah, but it would be nice to have a salad bar, it would be nice to have a pasta bar, it would be nice to have a grill and all that. And if you would be commercial, you would say, well, we only sell so many salads, so we don't have a salad bar. And there's only so much people taking the grill, no grill. And we just go for 3 courses instead of going for 6. Why? Because that makes commercially more sense. So here you are in what we say a social environment where the client says, no, we need to have a large offer for our clients. We need to have choice. We need to make sure that the person that comes at 1:30 still has the full offer. In a commercial restaurant, you would say, no, finished is finished. And then, so the dynamics are not matching between being social and being commercial. And that's why it's almost impossible to have a commercial restaurant in a social environment.
Yeah. If you had a magic wand and you could have an effect on catering in 10 years, what do you think, what would you like catering to look like 10 years from now?
There is so much to do because for me, I think if I could go to everything depends on, one of my favorites is it all starts with why. Everything is what do you want from your catering? What's the why of your catering? If you say, I want the why of my catering, my employees to be motivated and then you will probably go to models like if I'm not wrong, in restaurants or Facebook where people can eat whatever they want, it's free. Yeah. And so this is a completely different way of managing, which you say, you know what, I just take it as a human resources budget. This is what motivates my people. And so we will make sure that we allocate for every employee some money so that they can actually have coffee, eat for free, have a snack. And that is for me the most healthy way, because then it's a bit like an all-in hotel. You determine a price per employee and you say, okay, you know what? Have fun with that. Make sure that people can eat whatever they want. As long as there is this fight between, but there is a budget and we need to have some money from the people that are eating, it's going to be complicated. So simplifying, the magic thing would be simplifying the relationship between the client, the caterer, and the consumer, because now it's a three-party and it's very difficult they say, sometimes the client says, but you need to do everything you can to get the consumer happy. And then we do everything when the consumer is happy and he says, but wait a minute, every time there's somebody coming to the restaurant, I have to add money because I pay half of his bill. So now you have 25% more people coming to your restaurant. My budget is exploding. So, it's a three-party. It's very difficult to find a balance in that.
Yeah, interesting. I was wondering if you'd be interested in sharing a success story or like your favorite project that you've worked on or a story or something like that.
Yes. Well, one of the most projects I'm really happy about is CaterFlow, and it's a little bit the story I said before is putting all this knowledge in this software, and then finally the software beats you because he's seeing that you're going to miss 100 chairs, which I didn't see. So I'm very upset with my software now because he's seen something I didn't think of. I thought like, okay, I have the solution. Very good. I'm going from D- to A. That's it. My job is finished. And then suddenly, and with that, I found out that they cannot put 100 chairs more because they have limitations because of the fire exits. So my solution is not a solution anymore. It's actually CaterFlow beat me on that one. But in the world of catering, there has been so many stories. Every client is a different story. Being able to bring them to the next level of catering is a very hard thing. It's a very difficult way because it's a very traditional, caterers are very traditional. And so every time I sit in a meeting and I manage to bring them just that little step further, then I have my aha moments. I go like, yes, that's it, and the last 4 years where I'm not anymore as an employee, I have my own company. I've been able to do that much more often than in the framework of a company is to bring these aha moments where people say, okay, he inspired us. I think that's the way we need to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can move fast as an entrepreneur. You can really have a big effect in a very short period of time. That is difficult to do in an organization, and someone with your experience is best tailored to try and come up with their own solutions. And
Absolutely.
You've trained the AI on your knowledge, but it has the bandwidth much more than us humans have. So it's able to really take it to the next level, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the last section of the interview. I like to do a little rapid fire, quick questions. These are more fun. Do you have a favorite restaurant or hotel that you have, top of mind?
All the hotels I work for, no. That I would like to thank my sponsors. No, I've been thinking about this question, and for me, restaurants are linked to moments, and moments are linked to people. So I have very good souvenirs of certain restaurants, which are not very good restaurants, but just the sphere was there, the people were there, the people you love were around you. So for me, every restaurant is associated with a moment. So I enjoy more the moment than I enjoy really the restaurant.
Yeah.
Plus that I have the problem of I know how it works behind, you know.
Yeah.
So I try not to get too professional when I go to the restaurant, because then otherwise I screw up the whole lunch. I go
Yeah.
like, okay, I know why they did this. Okay.
Yeah.
So I try just to enjoy the people around me. So the best restaurants are the places where I spend the best time with the people I love and the people around me.
Yeah. Coffee, tea? Which do you prefer to start your day off? How do you get through the day?
I was a big coffee drinker and stopped a few years ago. I was 10 coffees a day, probably because I was an employee, so you stand a lot on the coffee machine. But that's finished. Now I'm a tea drinker. It's much better for health, and gets you less nervous,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. More even level of energy, I think throughout the day.
Absolutely.
Is there a hospitality skill that you think is underrated that you wish to see it more in people?
The hospitality skill that I think is underrated is that I come from 5-star hotel business. And when I'm now in catering and I see people, they say, oh, we're going to train our staff to have a better hospitality. We're going to learn them to smile and everything. They are not getting the fact that when you come from 5-star restaurant, you know that all this is done by design. You don't create 5-star moments if you haven't designed them. So one of the skills that is underrated is the fact that people need to know that there is a training behind that is very, very specific. If you go to big jewelry like Cartier, every movement the lady makes has been scripted. She will show you the necklace. She will put on a white glove to show it's important. She will take it in her hand on the white glove because it's an important something. Then she will put it around her neck so you can visualize. Everything has been scripted. In the hotel business, it's the same. When somebody comes in the lobby, the person at the front desk will look at her, will nod, so you know that she acknowledges you even if she's busy. You already know that, okay, she's seen me. It is all scripted. And now I see too many places that sort of training, 5-star training, has been dripped out, is not existing anymore in many places. And you have people and they say, oh, just stand behind the reception and just smile and be nice. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You need to script everything in hospitality.
Yeah. This is slightly off topic, but I thought I would share it. Here in some restaurants in the US, chain restaurants that are sort of more on the lower end, they sometimes they'll try and do something like to the table. They'll put like your bill on the table. They'll do something to signify to the staff that you're a first time guest, because the host will ask, "Yo, have you been here before?" And then they're trying to identify, do we need to treat this person extra special? And I think that was a trick of the high end restaurants.
Yes.
But now the less expensive restaurants are starting to also do that as well, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of the framework of, how you say, designing service moments come from the United States. I mean, the United States has always been much better in making operational manuals than Europe. Europe is always on the Europeans speak a lot with the heart. Maître d' is working with passion. In the United States, people work with skills, with set procedures. In France and in Europe, they talk with the hands and they okay. So it has its limits. It has its limits.
Yeah. Is there a favorite global cuisine that you like the most?
I would say probably Italian. Yeah, Italian always does it. I think Italian is a lot of fresh food. If there is Italian, I'm always happy. Now, little by little, I'm starting to enjoy Spanish cuisine because I live now for the last 4 years in Marbella, and the level of culinary knowledge here is also quite big. So it's Mediterranean. Let's stick to Mediterranean because of Spanish, Italian, probably some Greek.
Right.
Very nice kitchen.
Right. Is there a business book or a podcast or like a resource that you would like to share with people that has, really helped you in your career?
I've always been a big fan of Simon Sinek with everything starts with why, and also the infinite game, the fact that you don't compete against anybody, you just compete against yourself, and it's never finished. So these are really two books that I would really recommend to people, even mainly when you're looking for some sense in what you do.
Right. Is there something, our audience is primarily facilities professionals, facility managers. Is there something from a catering perspective that a facility manager should measure that maybe that they're not?
I think I'm going to say what they are measuring, which they shouldn't measure, which is food cost on individual items. They're trying to compare too many caterers on false KPIs. I think they should really find a different way to write their tenders.
Yeah.
I often say the tender is the nail to your coffin because very often they write tenders. I very often a consultant for a catering company, and there's many tenders where I told them I don't even want to answer. Why? Because the way the client is putting his questions, we're going to propose him something that is not good for him. And I know it's not good for him, but we need to fill in the boxes. And by filling in the boxes, we will come to the fact that he's going to buy something that I can tell him is not going to work. And so I think they need to review the tender process, and I think they need to find the caterer that will challenge them and that they can challenge and that can take them from, as I said, from point A to B more than they have to buy the caterer because, oh, he was the one who gave the best offer on the sandwich. I mean, doesn't make sense.
Well, thank you, Willem, for joining us on this show and sharing your
Thank you for your time.
experience. Of course, I feel like I learned so much about hospitality, catering operations, and honestly, entrepreneurship. I look forward to seeing, more from you, and please feel free to reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe to the Facility Focus podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.